Hi, my name is Harris. I'm one of your podcast hosts. I'm also a lawyer at Treadstone Law. For most Canadians, buying, selling, or refinancing real estate, a lawyer is the last thing on their mind. That's unfortunate because lawyers play a vital role in the process. But what choices do Canadians have? Lawyers can be very expensive. Well, Treadstone Law offers resources to Canadians so they have access to the information they need. Whether you sign up for a live workshop or a mailing list, we cover topics to help you make informed decisions and avoid costly mistakes. It's advice you can start using today, and best of all, it's free. Visit treadstonelaw.ca/MAS offer or click the link below to get access right now. If you're looking to retain Treadstone Law, it's never been easier. Our entire process is online. From completing the retainer agreement to your signing appointment, everything is done from the comfort of your own home. We're your digital lawyers. The best part of it is that you don't pay anything when you're retaining our firm. Visit treadstonelaw.ca/MAS offer or click on the link below to retain us right now. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome to another episode of Hustle and Grit. Today on our podcast, I have Bruno Marsala. Bruno began his career as an aspiring realtor, then became a mortgage specialist and was eventually recruited to mortgage sales management roles at both CIBC and RBC. During his 20 years on the bank side of the mortgage financing industry, Bruno has mentored and trained many of today's top industry leaders and professionals. In early 2018, Bruno shifted from the banking side of the mortgage business and became a licensed mortgage agent with Pilrock Mortgages in Vaughan, Ontario, and hasn't looked back. He has won awards every year for service and excellence in production volume. His Google reviews pretty much sum up his approach to a true client-first experience. Welcome to the podcast, Bruno.
Thanks, Harris. Nice to be here.
You know, I went through your website. It's pretty good. I love it. There's a lot of accolades. You've accomplished a lot in the industry, and like I just kind of went over in your intro, you've worked with some of the big banks, and then you kind of are a broker with Pilrock. Can you kind of go through your journey for our listeners? How you got into mortgage brokering? Is this something that you always wanted to do? Was it something that you fell into? Can you kind of walk us through that entire journey?
Yeah, I mean, where do I start? I guess let's go right back to like when I was a teenager, about 17. I was kind of not sure what I wanted to do. I had a cousin who was in the business selling new homes at the time. Actually, I was doing resale too. And it was just through my dad sort of, saying, you'd be great, getting into real estate. You should look at that. I wasn't old enough to get into the game. I wasn't officially 18 yet, but I was able to go to school and take the courses. And I think back then, phase 3 I did at Humber, and I was 18. I got licensed, and like anything, you set out to start a business. You think you're going this way, but then the world just takes you that way. And so I started with a relatively large company in Brampton at the time, Johnson and Associates, and at 18, it was pretty difficult. I had limited resources. I couldn't compete with some of the big names that are still, marquee names in Brampton now. And so the broker owner, Art Johnson, great guy, saw an opportunity and said, look, I have this broker in-house. Things aren't working out. Would you be interested in maybe going to school? I'll bankroll you to go get your mortgage broker's license. You can come in-house and maybe fill in the queue here at one of the offices out of the 3 offices he had. So I said, I'm 18, what do I got to lose? So I did it. And within, a year, I started getting my feet wet in the industry. Still, again, really hard. There was a few established brokers in the area that had a well-known presence in those offices. So it was hard to crack that nut. Again, being young, naive, a lot of people with seasoned reps that were just not interested. And then through a fluke thing, I happened to talk to one of the guys that I was sending some business to, and he said, CIBC is putting together their own sales force. They're thinking of getting into this mortgage business and compete against brokers. Would you be interested in, having a look? I said, sure, why not? And, of course, coming from an Italian father and a Mexican mother, it was like, my dad's always, get a job with the bank, pension, blah, blah, blah. And I'm stereotyping my dad being this typical Italian. He's more Canadian than you'll ever expect. long story short, I joined their company. I was one of the first few guys on board with CIBC back then when they started their sales force. And stayed there for almost 10 years, watched the program develop, became a sales manager there. I was there through the acquisition of when they acquired First Line Trust. It was quite an interesting time. They rebranded as CIBC Mortgages, Inc. And then it was time for me to go. I just wanted to change. So I tried something actually different for a little bit there. I switched roles and went for a short stint on their ABM network. I wanted to learn a little bit about bank machines and, the whole thing there. At the ABM network, lasted 6 months. Couldn't work downtown, just not my thing. But I said, there was a friend of mine at RBC that I kind of known in the business, and he was doing quite well. And he said, well, why don't you come check out what we're doing over here? And I said, sure. So I took a look there, and man, I remember the first sales meeting joining the RBC sales force. It was night and day. I thought I walked into a room full of cowboys, and it was, it was the wild, wild west. And again, relatively new sales force. They had sort of no restrictions from a bank perspective at the time. So it was great. I really got in at the early stages, saw things that was, it was so amazing. Like back then we were paid on approvals. I mean, that's how cool it was. Oh, wow. That didn't last very long, but the idea was that they were just so non-regulated in the sense that we could do what we wanted. We could market aggressively. We could do things. And of course, over time, things got tightened up. The program grew. And the writing was on the wall. I mean, I was competing, stepping over toes with colleagues in the same branches. And I stayed there for a year as a sales manager. I thought, well, I'll give that a try too. And for some reason, history had a way of repeating itself. I went back to being a sales manager, tried it, was there for a year, didn't like it, and I decided to just take a leave. So that was about, between those two runs with the bank, it was almost 20 years. Yeah. Oh, wow. So it was a long time. Saw a lot of things, got to learn a lot. I mean, do I miss the biggest thing I think I missed there was the camaraderie I had with my friends. I built some lifelong friendships there. I mean, in fact, I'm back at a brokerage now, with the same guys that, worked under me at CIBC, and they own their own brokerage. So it's kind of hilarious. I mean, the president of Dominion Lending Group is, he worked under my team. So it was pretty interesting to see where, oh, wow. One of the top underwriters at Scotiabank is worked under my team. So it was kind of neat to come back to the world of the broker side and see all these old familiar faces. And they all had said, it's about friggin' time you came over. Like, what were you thinking? But, I was loyal to both brands for a while there, and I did like what I saw, but towards the end, it was time for me to go. And even my dear friend, the sales manager at RBC, the last sales manager I had, she saw the writing on the wall. She knew right away. She's like, you're just so limited here to do what you want to do and market yourself the way you want to. So,
I mean, to what you just previously kind of talked about in terms of what your dad was saying in terms of getting a job at a bank, and I feel like it's not your dad, it's like every dad, every parent, anyone who's kind of, because you look at like a big bank like RBC or CIBC, and you're thinking job stability, there's a lot of things there that you feel like are going to set you up for a comfortable life, and moving into perhaps mortgage brokering at a brokerage, you step away from that a little bit. Mm-hmm. How was that transition? Do you feel like it was something that you're like, I got to take, because from what you're saying that, I need to grow, next step, or was there kind of a back and forth? What was going on in your mind as you kind of made that transition?
Of course, there was a lot of doubt. You weren't sure, but I knew getting up in the morning, going to the bank and knowing, that famous saying Steve Jobs says about, if you're dreading going to work every day, it's time to make that change. Something to those lines. I remember getting up one morning, and I just knew. I can't do this anymore. This is not what I want. I'm not going to live this scripted lifestyle over here that they had suggested we go by. And it was time. And so I made some calls. I did some, called up some old friends in the industry. They were running their own brokerages. Told them about what I'm thinking of doing there, and they were all like, "Hey, we want you wherever you go. We know, come with us, come with us." So it was great to have those doors open. And then I had a conversation with one of the top mortgage brokers in the country, who was kind enough to share some time with me on the phone. And it's funny, I remember that conversation. It was kind of like, he just validated everything. He goes like, "What are you doing, man? Like, just get over here." And then we just had a conversation not even 2 months ago, and he's like, "Remember that?" I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, like, who would have thought? So so I owe him a lot. He was one of the catalysts there, and of course, Nino, who runs one of the partners of Pill Rock, he was very encouraging too. He's like, "You're going to do just fine." And of course, we're all victims of our own mindsets, and at the time, I was just not sure, and
So
the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. So with all that experience, with the experience like seeing a team being built within a big bank, working and in the mortgage brokerage industry, seeing how everything kind of evolved, right? We're nowhere where it was when it started. What would you say defines or describes or is a good sign of a great broker, a great mortgage broker, someone who is really knows what he's doing and would excel within the industry? What are the signs for kind of pinpointing that?
Wow, there's a lot to unwind in that one, but I would say to you, one of the biggest things I notice as a broker coming on this side, and it's just I see the feedback from the clientele that are calling me out of frustration dealing with a previous broker, going like, why? Like, I think a lot of people, you jump into this business, you think you're going to do well. It's not easy. It's a tough business to get started in. There's a little bit of math. You got to get your head around the whole concept of mortgages, amortization. Believe it or not, I take it as second nature, but a lot of people don't get it. So that's the one component, just on the actual underwriting, understanding credit, the 5 C's of credit, all that. That's your one component. But then you also have to learn marketing to run a business, right? And this is where I think a lot of folks, they drop the ball. I mean, they're running a business and they get overwhelmed too fast, and all of a sudden the client gets impacted. And so I think one of the key attributes is that you have to be organized. I know my weakness is administrative work. I cannot stand it. I do not like it. I like being here, having these conversations. I like talking to people. So I took the leap of faith and I hired a full-time underwriting assistant, and she just takes that massive weight off of my shoulders. Does it cost me every month? Absolutely. But you know what? Frees up my time now. It's a human resource system that allows me to do the things that I'm good at. And when you can recognize that you have to make that investment, those are good signs. And of course, I don't have to get into the basic 101. Like if you have a good website, no more, John Smith at hotmail.com, gmail.com. Those are signs of right there. I mean, I could make an app and a service just for realtors and mortgage brokers, just about the whole top level domain of their email address. I could make a killing off it just to switch them over. I mean, it's crazy. You should be really focused on building your own brand. And that was the big thing too, is that, how well are you building your brand? Are you relying just on a templated site from one of the big brokerage houses? I right away was like, nope, don't want that. I'm going to learn how to make my own website, built my own website. And just, these are things that just separate you from the pack and put you in that top percentile.
Yeah. And even taking, like you just said, taking a leap of faith and hiring somebody, I think, is a huge deal, just because a mortgage, safe to say, is no longer just a mortgage. There's so many different products out there, and then you mix that in with what's going on in the media. When your clients come in often enough, like you can't just tell them, hey, this is your rate, whatever. You have to build that trust. You have to make sure they understand where you're coming from, where the market's going. And so one person cannot do everything. It really takes a team. Even though the client may be talking to one person, it takes a team to really give them the best solution and have them understand. Because the best part is you can give them the best solution. If they don't understand what they've got, there is no way. It means nothing to them, right? So it takes a team not only to get the best solution, but to show them that this is the best solution.
Yeah.
So
I mean, put it this way. I study the interest rate. Like, I mean, I was telling a few of my friends last year in the industry, I said, have you looked at that new report that came out from that scholar during the heat of the pandemic? And it's called the 700-year interest rate study. And it was a PhD candidate that was basically just studying the history of interest rates for going back 700 years. I mean, and it doesn't take much to see that it just goes like this, right? I didn't know that. If I was so focused on building my doing a deal, filing for compliance, I wouldn't have the time to go sit, do some research, do some deep dive into the net, find things that I didn't see, and then be able to, again, like you said, be able to give clients that information that they would go, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Or, like for example, right now, we'll probably discuss it shortly, but if you look at some of the indicators in the United States, there's a lot of things there that we have to now pay attention to. Here's an interesting thing that I just came up that kind of surprised me the other day. And I've probably given it away, but I was doing some keyword searching just to say, like, what am I looking to target now if I wanted to do some online ads, And I figure the typical consumer is going to put in interest rates, mortgage renewal, Canadian interest rates. You know what the number one search query is right now? It is the Bank of Canada. Bank of Canada. Just blew out the doors. Since when does a consumer start searching the Bank of Canada? But that's because the narrative's been shifted so much now in the media that they have no choice but to follow what's happening. I had a client call me the other day and say, like, Bruno, I've never done so much research on interest rates. And then I'm like, well, have you listened to this individual in the United States? How about this gentleman here? And he's like, no, give me more, give me more. So it's kind of interesting, like, that's what separates, again, you from the pack. Like, you're not going to get this kind of dialogue from someone, I feel, and I could be wrong, but I don't think you're going to get that with somebody at a branch, doing your mortgage. They're not going to have that because they're focused on so many other things, cross-sell this, cross-sell that, blah, blah, blah. Just the bureaucracy that goes on for the reporting at the branch level when you're working for the bank, it was just like, how can you have any time to do anything? And where's the incentive for me?
Yeah, no, it's safe to say I think we both love banks. We work with banks all the time, but there are weaknesses there. And one of the biggest weaknesses is if you go in and you meet a mortgage specialist that's really good at their job, they're going to get promoted. So it's not even a lifelong relationship. For me, whenever somebody comes to me and they're trying to make a decision, I'm like, this is a no-brainer. Like, for me, I'm a relationship-based person. You want to ensure that whoever's doing your mortgage is not just giving you a mortgage, but it's going to begin to understand who you are, what you want in life. Do you got kids? Do you want to get married? Are you gonna do you want a vacation home? What's your lifestyle? Right? Do you need another line of credit afterwards because your kid's going to college? There's so many different things, and instead of piecemealing it and saying, hey, who's going to give me the best rate, which is a horrible way to look at things, but it's the only thing that it makes sense to people, so that's the only thing they look at. But if that's the only thing that they're looking at, they're not going to make the best decision, right? Because you could get the best rate. As you'd know better than I would, there's a lot of people who have been trying to get into fixed rates as opposed to variable, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just, you really have to, when you're in a fixed rate and you're trying to get out, the penalty is much higher, right? And I'm kind of jumping into the market side here. But with variable, right, there is no, there's a 3-month interest penalty, but you know that if you need to change out of a product, you can because life happens, right? So,
well, as my good friend Dustin says, right, life is variable, so should your mortgage, right? So it's kind of true. I mean, who saw a pandemic coming? Who saw these needs to shift and cohabitate with family and readjust and move? These things would have limited your ability, albeit, not a dramatic impact. But I think you and I in our first discussion said, like, you as a solicitor are seeing things like penalties that were just astronomical, right? And so that's a scary premise. That just adds insult to industry, adds insult to injury when you have to pivot. And you have to do it because of a life circumstance, and all of a sudden, by the way, before you can pass go, you've got to pay this $20,000, right? Yeah. It's like, oh man, that sucks.
And $20,000, believe it or not, was one of the lower penalties. Like the average one that we were looking at was like $30,000 to $40,000, and I'm just like, you know what? It adds up. Did anybody kind of add that into their interest rate before kind of understanding what you're really paying at the end of the day? But that's just I guess how the industry is, right? Because that's why I always tell anybody who's coming to me and asking me where they should go, speak to a broker and then trust them. Find somebody you trust, go to a broker that you understand, and then trust them. Let them make not let them make a decision completely, but trust them in that they're giving you proper guidance, that if you're getting a low rate, it may not be a low rate that you're thinking of, and it's going to cost you more in the end, because what you're looking at is your total cost over the life of the mortgage and not just what your payment is every single month. Because if you pay $40,000 when you're exiting after 3 years, right?
All
that's
that
an
savings.
that's an extra like $12,500, $13,000 every year that you're paying on top of.
Well,
on
I think the other thing too is we all have to have a commandment of control in our lives, right? And so when I lock into a fixed rate mortgage, I lose control when it comes to the bank if I have to make a move. I lose total control. They win, right? I mean, to a certain degree. I mean, for example, how many people we saw leave Ontario to go out east, and shift that way? Well, you can't just port those mortgages over. You have to break them, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and so if that control aspect, the bank basically holds those cards over you. And I don't mean the bank per se. That's any lender that has a fixed rate product, right? So let's clarify that. Those are the monolines as well. But so, I mean, it's, I think I said it to you when we spoke as well. Like, we're no longer just mortgage agents / brokers. We are planners. We're helping people plan around their lives and try to figure out, and I can tell you if a client called me right now, I know their personal history. I mean, I've had clients call me going, geez, you still remember that? I'm like, yeah, of course. I take your business that serious. I remember the conversation we had, So, I've only had maybe 2 or 3 clients so far that have expressed some concern about what we're coming into, and maybe I'm segueing into the rate in the market, et cetera. But, so we're starting to do some sort of break and take two kind of ideas. Break the mortgage and the variable, go into a 2-year fix just to hold it right now, just to see where things go. We haven't made the decision. We've just locked the approvals in, but that gives them a nice 4-month window now to just see what happens coming through for September's rate announcement. I think December 9th announcement as well, or the 7th.
So are you currently recommending locking in, or are you still saying stay variable?
No, I'm not. I think that boat has sailed in terms of a decent rate to lock in if you wanted to lock in. I'm basically still a big proponent. I mean, I practice what I preach. I'm in a variable rate mortgage. I'm in a variable rate mortgage with an adjustable payment. So, I started in 2018 with my 30-year amortization. I'm down to 11 years. Fast forward, 4-year anniversary this month. I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm happy to see that number keep going down. As a side note, I was told about a client that had a variable rate mortgage with another lender, not in the broker space. Payment didn't adjust, so it was a fixed rate on a variable, as a fixed payment on a variable. And apparently they didn't pay attention. And I still want to see the statement, but he saw it and he told me. And without them paying attention over the years, their amortization is 64 years right now. I just heard this last week. And I'm like, how could that be? Was there no trigger rates? It may have been an older mortgage before there was a trigger rate clause put in there. I don't know. But I thought that was incredible. So I'm still waiting to see the statement. But the source I trust. They saw it and they said they'll send it to me just to show me, because I couldn't believe it. So, that you got, these are things, again, that you have to pay attention to. So people say, well, my payment keeps creeping. It's going up. It's going up. I'm like, well, everything is going up right now. But, if you follow, Ray Dalio in his latest book, New World Order, and you look at the whole cycles where we are right now, we're in a deleveraging cycle, right? So, I mean,
1%. The 1%, 2% interest rate also is just, those expectations are too high, for lack of better words.
Right.
I mean, to have I think HSBC had something for 0.99%.
99 on the variable.
Yeah, yep. and then if you break, I mean, was it variable? I thought it was fixed, but whatever it was, getting out of these mortgages would be expensive. So there's always these caveats that people didn't see, but at the same time, have that is not necessarily a good thing. That was also why house prices are going up like no tomorrow as well, because people don't necessarily buy $1 million home. They buy a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month home, because they look at what they can afford, and then whatever they can afford is how the house prices go up.
Well, and that was one of the things that I saw a lot of clients during this whole thing. Like, they were kind of just going for the max. And I was like, I've never been a big proponent of just maxing out your pre-approval. I mean,
Yeah.
life happens, like you said.
Yeah.
You know, the clients would tell me, well, you know, I'm like, well, okay, you're a young couple. Do you plan on having children anytime soon? And they're like, yeah. And I go, have you realized or have you done the math on what that kind of impact's going to have on the bottom line?
Yeah,
I have 3 children. I have 2 teenage boys that eat like gorillas. Like, I mean, the cost of running that, like, it's killing me right now on my finances, right? Just the amount of food they eat.
Yeah.
So, you know, and let's not even talk about food prices. So, you know, I was never one to go, and I mean, I could right now go out and buy a $3 million home. Do I want to? Absolutely not, because I don't want that burden hanging over my head. I want to be able to have that flexibility and enjoy my life and not be strapped. So I was never one to push the envelope too far. If the client was happy with what they saw and they're like, listen, we know we can do this, I'm like, where's your reserve fund? Do you have something to back you up?
Yeah.
As long as they could demonstrate to me with some form of diligence being done on their part to say, yeah, we've looked at the numbers, we think we can make this work. Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure you're aware of what you're up against. You know?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is also that people got a bit too comfortable with debt. It was something that they didn't think twice. And when you're buying a house and you're leveraging up as much as you can, especially like a year ago, where you couldn't put in any kind of conditions. All you had to do was kind of give a blind bid above listing and pray to God that it gets accepted. And I just feel like that is just an insane way to really buy a house, because it's not a chocolate bar. Like, you'd want a home inspection, you want a financing condition, because I saw at least firsthand a lot of individuals who went online, they plugged in some mortgage calculator that spat out a number, and it said you could afford X, Y, Z. And these calculators are built so that they just give you some amazing number, makes you feel good. And then they go use that number to go bid on a house. And then when they try to get an approval, they no longer can get an approval for that rate. They can't get approval for that amount. So now you're making a lot of tough decisions, and sometimes if that means that you're losing your deposit, possibly getting sued, that those were all on the table. So there was a lot of stressful situations that I saw that like at least you don't have that in the market now. I'm like, you know what, in a lot of ways, people should be going out and looking for houses now, because you could put in a financing condition and you could put a home inspection condition on.
But now you've got the other side of the coin, that people still get this. Logic doesn't trump emotion when it comes to buying a home, unfortunately. Like my old boss at the RBC used to say, buying a home is 85% emotion, 15% logic. And he's absolutely right. I would say it's even more now with all of the way we're influenced by social media, et cetera, and all that. But, you know, when you look at, there are some clients out there that, you know, against my advice, went out, bought another home firm, and haven't sold their place yet, and now they're stuck carrying these 2 properties, and what are they going to do? I don't know. We're trying everything. I mean, I'm giving them the worst case scenarios right now. Right now, we're just trying to delay the inevitable. We're trying to push closing dates out, work with the vendors to see if we can get a little bit extra time, but that's stress. But I mean, to your point, going back last year, you know, the stress that myself and my underwriter, Adina, and I went through, just trying to keep people in check when they wanted to go and buy a property without a financing condition, it was insane. Like it was like I take every client's file very seriously, so I had to make it clear. And I mean, I'm no fool. I mean, everything's documented. Everything was like, hey, be aware of what you're up against here. Just don't, you know. So I had a lot of people making some silly moves against my wishes, but hey, at the end of the day, they made the final call. And now, like I said, we got people now that want to buy a bigger home, and I'm like, but you realize now it's not that easy to sell your house just as quick. So you better be careful. Don't care. So I think, and it's clicking in. I've had a few clients now say to me, you know what, we're not going to do anything until we sell our house first, or at least, you know, have a deal that we can get where the offer is accepted conditional on the sale of our home, which we're starting to see again. Which you tried to do that last year or 2020. Forget it. Not impossible.
Always have to be firm.
Firm, and that's kind of craziness, right? You know, you talk about debt. You know, I caught an amazing discussion on the internet. I follow a former advisor to the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, and she had on one of the top car guys in the U.S., and they had a 1-hour discussion, and it was almost like that pre-2008 discussion with the guy from the movie The Big Short about the subprime crisis. Well, apparently there's something brewing in the works in the United States with the whole car thing. And, you know, again, being able to buy a car, No problem. $500 down, you can finance this $80,000 truck, no problem. Those numbers are, those are part of your finances. And it's interesting how many clients I've talked to since last year that like, oh, the car died, so we just bought a new car. Oh, we need a new car, so we just bought a new car. I'm like, what were you thinking? Like, I've been saying all along for the last year in my videos and in my blogs about interest rates, keep the debt low. Do not take on any more debt right now, because that is just it's like an ankle around your chain that's going to hold you back,
Yeah. No, 100%. So where do you see, this is a crystal ball question, but where do you see interest rates going in the next year or so? I know that because I feel like our interest rates, and we like to kind of as Canadians be like, oh, it's because of inflation, but there is so much more to that. There's the fact that if we put our interest rates, the Bank of Canada pushes up their interest rates too high, we're looking at like maybe a stronger Canadian dollar, which means weakens exports to the States. There's a lot of things involved here. So it's not just, hey, prices are going up and inflation. There's a lot of coordination with the Federal Reserve. There's a lot of coordination there. And frankly speaking, we're not that big of a fish, so we have to follow suit in a lot of ways. So where do you feel like we're headed in the next quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters?
I think we're going to see some more increases. I think for sure you're going to see another one in September. Their idea of trying to get inflation down around 2% is just out of this. It's just mind-boggling. I don't know where this fairy tale, how they can think that they're going to do that. But I do think a few things. I think the ramifications of what we saw back in July with that 1% increase, which was sort of unprecedented compared to what the U.S. did, that will have its domino effect, I think, coming into the fall. I think things will start to see some more impact. I don't think the worst is yet to come. I think there's still going to be a lot more pain coming down the line for a lot of families that weren't really prepared for this, sadly. But I think, the Bank of Canada has to do their job in the sense that, that 1% rate increase that they did was like, hey, we're showing Canada we're doing what we can to stave off this inflation and keep things down. So it was a bit political, but I don't think it's not enough, and I think we're going to see some more. And I'm just curious to see what's going to happen in the United States because, it seems now in the United States, from what I'm seeing there's a lot of gaslighting, if you will. Like, oh, no, we're not in a recession or anything. Well, we've had 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. And that whole thing with this U.S. car market thing, I've been watching it quite a bit. That's car delinquencies. Like we're talking, loans were done. It's not a regulated industry. Like loans were being done on cars at 150, 160% loan to value. And these were for AAA clients, but if I got to keep the roof over our head and get rid of this, $1,000 a month BMW that I don't need, buy car and they'll just go away. And that's going to have a trickle down effect into the economy as well. So I think there's going to be some sort of crevice that's going to crack open in terms of an economic event. It's inevitable. That's kind of just how the way these cycles work. And then there's going to be, at some point, there's going to have to be some pivoting. It's interesting because last week they were talking in the United States that, the stance is not really, we're going to go after it, but the other side, there was like, some dovish tones in the dialogue there that they may not go as aggressive as they thought. So who knows? It's hard to say, but I would say to you, bank on what you know that you don't know it, so be prepared for it, So, and that's why I keep telling clients, like, assume that, you don't know what's going to happen. So if you don't know what's going to happen, what's the worst that you're willing to accept at this point? Just like Ray Dalio talks about in sort of building a sort of rock solid, investment strategy. If you're like, hey, listen, I know my threshold right now is $4,800 a month and I cannot go past that, then what do I have to do? Well, okay, maybe you have to break and go to a 1 year and that'll lock that payment in. You ride the storm out for a little bit, right? That's the beauty of having that variable rate as an opportunity because it gives you that exit strategy, maybe reset things for a little bit just to ride out if there's going to be a bit of a more storm. But I think there's going to be some tougher times ahead still, and I think there's going to be a few more rate hikes to the degree of which we're going to see 1%, like those big, bolstering injections. I don't think so. I think they got to tread lightly now because now consumers are getting pissed off, and that, we're getting election times coming through and people just, That stuff's all going to come down the line and make some decisions for them when it comes to politics. Now come into play, unfortunately, into the Federal Reserve. You look at the United States; they are no longer a agnostic kind of entity. They are tied politically in there, and that's the problem now. And that's a problem.
I would say that the last true federal chairman was Paul Volcker, and he made some hard decisions. And after that, I mean, they say Greenspan was allowed to the economy to grow so much, but really he took advantage of what Paul Volcker did, which was raise the interest rates, and he keep cutting them down. And each time you cut them down, you're going to spend money. Yeah, yep, and then that's it. So that's one of the biggest things.
Sorry, I was going to say, there are some great books, like Danielle DiMartino Booth's book, Fed Up, is a great book. And that talks exactly to what, she worked under these guys and she saw the writing on the wall. Now she runs Cool Intelligence in the United States. And you know what? She is one of the hardest women working right now in the finance journalist space. I mean, I follow her religiously. I like what she talks about. She's good pals with David Rosenberg up here. So, it's nice to see their dialogues. But, I think, like I said, I think that I don't know if they're going to pivot just anytime soon, but just let some numbers creep in that's going to be pretty astronomical. And the whole thing with the car thing in the United States is quite alarming from what I just read over the weekend. It's going to be like that thing that nobody saw coming, I think, and that's going to have a negative impact for sure.
So what you're saying, just to kind of conclude the sentiment here, would be if somebody, like any of our listeners, is thinking of buying a house, you're not necessarily saying don't buy the house. Just figure out what you can tolerate, what's your threshold, and then buy accordingly. As opposed to the bank approved me for X amount, I got to go spend X, possibly X plus one.
Well, okay, and the other thing that we have to think about too is we don't know what we don't know. We know what we don't know, and that is what if there becomes a big recessionary event where you got a couple buying their first home, great, $165,000 a year combined income, good, strong income to buy something. But what happens if the one partner loses their $65,000 a year job, right? Yep. Yes, they're going to get a little bit of money to tie them over with severance and all that, but that dries up eventually. And if there's no, I'm not trying to cast doom and gloom, but you have to be prepared. The term VUCA, I'm sure a lot of people have never heard of, but it's something that is coming more prevalent in the business space here. It's been around for a long time. It's a military term. Volatility, uncertainty. Oh my gosh, I had a brain freeze there. VUCA, volatility, and the last one's ambiguity. I'll get to C in a minute. But the point is that complexity. Complexity. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguous. That's the world we live in now, and that's the way it's going to be moving forward. So as a couple, as a buyer, you need to be prepared. I'm already 10 steps ahead figuring out, okay, if the world falls apart in a handcart next week, what am I doing? How am I going to pivot? What do I need to do? Where's my dry powder, my reserves? Dalio says it again in his book, right? It's a famous philosophy, a smart rabbit has 3 burrows to run to, not just one. So they have an ability under attack, know when to go. So, I try to encourage a lot of clients, what are you doing to say, okay, how can I offset any impact of a negative event? And so, not to digress, but yes, plan for the worst case scenario, have a threshold knowing that this is what it is. So maybe it is you take a 1 year or a 2 year term right now if you really want to buy, because I do think there's a great opportunity to buy real estate. I really do. Yeah. It's a great time definitely. If you can qualify. Yeah. Now you're somewhere in the stratosphere, 7-8% on the qualification rate, but it's definitely a good time, and I think there'll still be more buying opportunities in the future. I think the worst is not here yet. I think you're going to see some more price decreases.
Yeah, no, that's some awesome advice. If anybody wants to reach out to Bruno, I'm going to have his contact information either on the bottom or on the side, depending on where you're listening. But just to wrap up our conversation, and I normally ask this question in the beginning of the podcast, but we kind of had a really good conversation around market, and I did not want to let that go. But my question is, if any of my listeners want to reach out to you to get a mortgage, what's that process? Are you only digital? Do we have to walk into your office? How does that entire kind of journey work, taking out a mortgage with you?
I try to keep it as stress-free as possible. So we do all the heavy lifting. That's the first thing. So all I'm going to ask you is, the traditional step is, let's have a conversation first. Let's start with the conversation. Let me get some context of to what you are trying to achieve, how you can do this with your financial position. Once I know that, it's literally a quick email out. Hey, great chatting with you today. Here's the laundry list of things. Just send this over to us. That's all we need for now. We get that over to us. We literally get all that information. I'm not one to say, here, just go fill out an application online. Let us do that. Pardon me. Let us do that. We'll fill in the blanks, what we don't need, with a quick conversation with you. Everything's pretty much done digitally, a lot of video communication. If someone wants to come and visit me at my office up here in Orangeville, by all means, please come down. But Orangeville is just my, it's my home base. I do mortgages from, out to the east end in Belleville, Trenton, out that way, all the way as north up to Timmins. I'm working on one right now. So geographically, we're not confined that way with the technology, but we make it very simple. And the fact that, you're getting two heads for the price of one. My underwriting assistant, Adina, she's a 15-year veteran in the industry. I plucked her from RBC during this whole thing because she is amazing at what she does. She was an underwriter at ING. She was an underwriter at First Line for some time. And she worked on one of the biggest teams at RBC before they just burnt her out. And I said, well, come over to my side. I won't burn you out. We'll have some fun doing this. And of course, I brought her on just before the pandemic started. And then she said, I thought you said you weren't going to burn me out. Things just went astronomically crazy for us. But why we focus, I live by what I say, truly client first initiative. You will always get a hold of me. I am pulling the plug a little bit now on the weekends. I don't particularly answer the phone, so I get an out of office. If you try to WhatsApp, text me, whatever. But if it's urgent, I'll pick up the call. But most of the time, it can wait till Monday now. I need a bit of a life. I'm trying to recover myself from the whirlwind of what's happened over the last 2 years. So yeah, it's pretty painless, pretty straightforward. You will walk away, and I encourage people listening, watching, go check out my website, brunomarsala.ca, and just check out some of the reviews. I think that speaks for itself. I don't pay for those reviews. They're all legitimate clients that I just ask them, hey, would you be able to share a few words about your experience? Helps me help the next client understand who they're dealing with. And 9 times out of 10, they always absolutely, Bruno, what can I do? So.
Awesome. Yeah, no, again, if any of my listeners want to reach out to Bruno, contact information on the bottom or on the side, depending on where you're listening from. Thanks again for joining us. Bruno, any last words?
You know what? Just stay vigilant out there right now for the next little while. I think, but if you're thinking about buying a home, I think the next quarter is going to be a great time to start looking, and now's the time to start planning for it. I really do. I really think there's going to be some opportunities to buy a great piece of real estate, and at a more realistic price.
Yeah, no, definitely. Awesome. Great advice. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on here.